Good evening, everyone. This is Vibha Nasheen, and I'm here to do a book reading from the book Messages from the Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. Yesterday we began chapter 3, and today we are going to continue from the same chapter. Those who have missed the previous recordings may please go to my wall on Facebook and listen to the earlier chapters. It is already marked every day. So let's begin. Karma and lessons. We have debts that must be paid. If we have not paid out these debts, then we must take them into another life in order that they may be worked through. You progress by paying your debts. Some souls progress faster than others. If something interrupts your ability to pay that debt, you must return to the plane of reconciliation, and there you must wait until the soul you owe the debt to has come to see you. And when you both can be returned to physical form at the same time, then you are allowed to return. But you determine when you are going back. You determine what must be done to pay that debt. There will be many lifetimes to fulfill all the agreements and all of the debts that are owed. I have not been told about many of the other planes, but this plane involving debts that must be paid evokes the concept of karma. Karma is an opportunity to learn, to practice love and forgiveness. Karma is also an opportunity for atonement, to wipe the slate clean, to make up to those we may have wronged or hurt in the past. Karma is not only an Eastern concept, it is a universal idea embedded in all the great religions. The Bible says, "What you sow, that is what you reap." Every thought and every action has inevitable consequences. We are responsible for our actions. The surest way to reincarnate in a particular race or religion is to be manifestly prejudiced against that group. Hate is the express train carrying you to that group. Sometimes a soul learns to love by becoming what it most despised. It is important to remember that karma is about learning, not about punishment. Our parents and the other people with whom we interact possess free will. They can love and help us, or they can hate and harm us. Their choice is not your karma. Their choice is a manifestation of their free will. They are also learning. Sometimes a soul will choose a particularly challenging lifetime in order to accelerate its spiritual process, or as an act of love to help, guide, and nourish others who are also going through a similarly difficult lifetime. A hard life is not a punishment but rather an opportunity. We change races, religions, sex, and economic advantage because we must learn from all sides. We experience everything. Karma is ultimate justice. Nothing is overlooked or missed in our learning. Grace, however, can supersede karma. Grace is divine intervention, a loving hand reaching down from the heaven to help us to ease our burdens and our sufferings. Once we have learned the lesson, there is no need for further suffering, even if the karmic debt has not been fully repaid. We are here to learn, not to suffer. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the internationally famous psychiatrist and author whose pioneering research into death and dying and the near death experience changed the way we deal with death, told me the following story. Elizabeth was born an underweight triplet, and the doctor told her mother that at least two of the babies would not survive. But Elizabeth's mother was a woman of exceptional strength and courage, a woman who freely gave everything and anything to others but refused anything in return, a proud and extremely self reliant individual. She vowed that all three daughters would survive. She nursed them for nearly a year, keeping them with her in bed at all times for body warmth, like a present day neonatal incubator. All three children survived and flourished. Elizabeth was on the faculty of the University of Chicago Department of Psychiatry when she visited her mother in Switzerland, the family home. Her mother had an unusual request. Elizabeth, if I become a vegetable, I want you to give me something to put me out of the misery. Her mother said, I cannot do that. Elizabeth quickly replied, Yes, you can, insisted. You're the only one of my children who is a physician. You can give me something. No, I can't do that, Elizabeth repeated. Besides people like you have always been healthy, hiking and climbing. You will live to be 90 and go like that. Elizabeth added, snapping her fingers. Elizabeth refused to discuss the subject of any assisted suicide further, and she returned to Chicago. A month or so after this visit, Elizabeth's mother suffered a severe stroke that paralyzed most of her body. Although her mind remained relatively intact, this proud and independent woman who had to rely on others for most basic needs. I learn to listen to the premonitions of others, Elizabeth told me. Her mother died 4 years later, never having regained physical functioning. Elizabeth was furious with God. Working with dying children and their remarkable drawings, Elizabeth's spiritual horizon were expanding despite her anger. She also had begun to meditate. One day, soon after her mother's death, Elizabeth was rocked by a strong inner voice or message during her meditation. Why are you so angry at me? The voice asked. In her mind, Elizabeth replied, Because you made my mother suffer so much. This beautiful kid never accepted anything for herself but would give everything to others. You made her suffer for 4 years and then she dies? That was a gift to your mother. The voice answered gently. A gift of grace. Love must be balanced. If nobody were to receive love, who could give it? Your mother learned this in only 4 years instead of coming back for one or several lifetimes severely retarded or physically impaired, where she would have to accept the love of others. She has learned, and now she can move on. Hearing this and understanding the message, Elizabeth let go of her anger. Understanding can immediately heal our deepest pain. A mother and her teenage daughter participated in a group regression at one of my workshops, and both were overcome with emotion. During a break after the group exercise had been completed, they began to tell each other about their memories and reactions. They were startled to find themselves sharing the same lifetime long ago in more violent times. My daughter and I are here today the mother reported to the group because her daughter was too overwhelmed to speak. And I'm pretty sure we had a piece of past life recall, which was the same life during the meditation. What she told was that she was kept experiencing, she thought, being hit by a bull or a man with bull's horns and could see horns. She kept getting hit again and again. The mother continued, now talking about her own simultaneous experience. When she told me, I just heard the getting hit by a bull and started to spin out. The piece that I got in my past life turned out to be almost a Viking. There were like skins and stuffs and one of those heavy things on my head with those horns, and I came into a cave or a hut, and this little kid came to me and I killed him with a sword. And there was a lot of fear and it was all dark, and my daughter said that she was really afraid too, and her body hurt during the meditation, exactly where the sword wound was. She added, it really clearly it's hard to talk about, much harder than I thought. Both mother and daughter were still experiencing a profound emotional reaction to their shared memories of that lifetime. Pointed out that if this really were a shared lifetime they both spontaneously and simultaneously remembered, and they had died before, and now they were here again, healthy and together. There was no need for any guilt or anger, only for forgiveness and love. Their shared memories and shared lifetimes demonstrated that there is no death, only life. Some of the healing part is not just the memory, but just the catharsis, also the realization about death. And when you have it, and it's that intense, you start to realize that there is no death other than leaving the body. It's like walking through a door, but you are back again so you can make up and you don't have to feel guilty. The mother interrupted me. No, I don't. One of the things I have always told her is that I have liked her fierceness, even as a child. It was always really impressed me. We were joking about it now, and she said, last time it got me killed. But our relationship now feels very good, even better, and this whole thing feels pretty powerful. End of chapter 3, and we begin chapter 4 now. Creating love relationships. There are different levels of learning, and we must learn some of them in the flesh. We must feel the pain. When you are a spirit, you feel no pain. It is a period of renewal. Your soul is being renewed. When you are in physical state in the flesh, you can feel pain, you can hurt. In spiritual form, you do not feel. There is only happiness, a sense of well being, but it's a renewal period for us. The interaction between people in the spiritual form is different. When you are in physical state, you can experience relationships. After our birth in the physical state, our main source of learning is through relationships. Through the joy and pain of interaction with other people, we progress on our spiritual paths in order to learn about love from all sides. Relationships are a living laboratory, a field test to determine how we are doing, whether our lessons have been learned, to discover how close we are to our predetermined life plan. In relationships, our emotions are evoked and we react. Have we learned to turn the other cheek, or do we retaliate with violence? Do we reach out to others with understanding, love, and compassion? Or do we react with fear, selfishness, or rejection? Without relationships, we would not know, we could not test our progress. They are wonderful but difficult opportunities to learn. We are here in physical state in order to learn and to grow. We learn traits and qualities such as love, non-violence, compassion, charity, faith, hope, forgiveness, understanding, and awareness. We must unlearn negative traits and qualities including fear, anger, hatred, violence, greed, pride, lust, selfishness, and prejudice. It is primarily through relationships that we learn these lessons. More learning can occur when there are many obstacles than when there are few or none. A life with difficult relationships, filled with obstacles and losses, presents the most opportunity for the soul's growth. You may have chosen the more difficult life so that you could accelerate your spiritual progress. Sometimes a negative event, such as losing a job, may be the hand opening the door to a much better opportunity. We should not grieve prematurely. Destiny may need a little more time to weave its intricate tapestry. In addition to pain and hardship, there is also love and joy and ecstasy in this world. We are here to be in community, learning about love by being amidst other human beings who are on the same path, learning the same lessons. Love is not an intellectual process, but rather a dynamic energy flowing into and through us at all times, whether we are aware of it or not. We must learn to receive love as well as to give. Only in community, only in relationships, only in service can we truly understand the all encompassing energy of love. Over many years, I have treated countless couples and families who had been suffering in their relationships. I regress some of them, and we often found the past life causes of their current day conflicts. Others needed better skills in communicating, and others needed to understand each other at deeper levels. Some needed to revise their values and priorities, and some needed a technique or two to help them climb out of their ruts, to become unstuck and begin to change. Which type of intervention they needed became clear to us over a period of time. Growth occurred and their relationships were enriched when they honestly tried. Many of the suggestions and techniques I use with my patients are based on a deeper and more spiritual understanding of their lives and destinies than the assumptions of traditional psychotherapy. I have found that our hearts and our souls yearn for and respond to psychospiritual therapy much more than they do to purely intellectual or mechanical approaches. Because relationships are the soil of our growth while we are in physical state. I offer you some of my thoughts, suggestions, and techniques to help you in your relationships, especially if you feel some difficulty in this area of your life. Many of these thoughts and ideas came to me one day while I was meditating in the foothills above the city of Medellin in Colombia. I value them highly because they arrived in my consciousness during meditation. I could sense the presence or at least the influence of the masters around me, and thus I have barely edited this advice. I realize some may seem didactic and difficult. They were received, however, amidst a tremendous energy of caring and compassion. In reality, the messages and information are filled with love and healing. I can tell you from my experience in using these principles with those patients who needed help with their relationships that these techniques really work wonders. The following ideas are presented to you in a brief and crystallized form and are not designed for speed reading. You may want to put your reflections of these ideas into your journal. There is no hurry, there is no schedule, there is no test, and there's certainly no competition between you and your partner. Whether your partner is your lover, your parent, your child, your friend, or any other with whom you are in a relationship. I hope these help you to love more freely and without fear. Increasing your awareness of self and other. What is revealed to me is what is important to me, what concerns me. Each person must be concerned with him or herself, with making him or herself whole. We have lessons to learn, each one of us. They must be learned one at a time. Only then we can know what the next person needs, what he or she lacks, or what we lack to make us whole. Understand the nature of the self, the real self which is immortal. This understanding will help you keep things in the proper perspective. Know yourself so that you can see clearly without the distortions of the conscious mind or the subconscious. Practice meditation and visualization, detached observation, peaceful perception, feeling a sense of detached, loving kindness or loving detachment. Cultivate this state. Know your thoughts and assumptions and realize that you may have swallowed them whole. When you generalize these groups or stereotypes, you stop seeing the unique individual. Erroneous assumptions from our past, such as men are brutish and insensitive, or women are too sensitive and emotional, lead to a distorted reality. Experience is much stronger than belief. Learn from your experience. What helps without harming is valuable. Discard outdated beliefs and thoughts. Happiness comes from within. It is not dependent on external things or on other people. You become vulnerable and can be easily hurt when your feelings of security and happiness depend on the behavior and actions of other people. Never give your power to anyone else. Try not to become attached to things. In the three-dimensional world, we learn through relationships, not things. We all know that you cannot take things with you when you leave. When we die and our soul progress to higher dimensions, we take our behaviors, our deeds, our thoughts, and our knowledge with us. How we treated others in relationships is infinitely more important than what we have accumulated materially. Also, we may gain or lose any material objects during the course of our lifetime. You will not meet your possessions in the afterlife, but you will meet your loved ones. This thought should help you to rethink your values if necessary. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by John Gray has been a bestseller for many years in many countries. Numerous other books, movies, and television shows also have emphasized the seemingly insurmountable difference between men and women. A vast gulf separates the sexes and is apparent in the way we think and how we behave. We don't see the world the same way. Testosterone, a male hormone, inclines men toward aggression and competition instead of cooperation, toward ownership of home territory and of family. Estrogen and progesterone, the female hormones, seem to foster sensitivity, communication rather than competition, less urge toward aggression, and more toward protection. The way boys and girls are raised compounds the inborn asymmetry, and adds to the biological walls separating men and women. Boys are socially encouraged to be more aggressive, more competitive, more assertive. Girls are taught to be more passive, more communicative, more cooperative. We are taught different values by our parents and teachers, by our society and culture, and by our media and advertisers. There seems to be a great deal of truth to all of this. No problem can be solved until an awareness of this problem bubbles into consciousness. So now we know. What comes next? Certainly, boys can and should be raised to become aware of and to express more sensitivity. They can be taught to be more cooperative, and they can learn better communication skills. Girls can be raised to be more confident and more assertive. Overall, the raising of boys needs to be altered more than the raising of girls. Because the world is engulfed today by the violence caused almost exclusively by men. But what about the inborn biological differences? How can we change biology? What do we do about testosterone? Here is one metaphor. Hormones and certain genetic factors cause hair to grow on the faces of men. Does this mean that beards are inevitable? That all men need to walk around with long beards on their faces? Of course, the answer is no. Men have the option to shave off their beards. Any man can choose to do this or not. The biological influences are tendencies. They can be overcome by conscious will. Testosterone or other hormones impel, but they do not compel. Just as men can choose to shave, they can choose to be non violent, less aggressive, more cooperative and communicative, more sensitive. The conscious decision by men to choosing the loving path, not the violent path, is the next step. Beyond this choice lies yet another step, which is the reawakening to the spiritual truth that we are spirit and soul, not body and brain. The soul has no sex, no hormones, no biological tendencies. The soul is pure, loving energy. As we become aware of our spiritual nature, we recognize our true essence. We are immortal and divine. Renouncing violence, hate, dominance, selfishness, and ownership of people and things becomes easier with this recognition. Accepting love, compassion, charity, hope, faith, and cooperation becomes the natural thing to do. Some switching of the sexes occur over the course of many lifetimes. We have all been men and we have all been women. Although I believe we tend to specialize in one sex or the other. We all must, like college students, take some elective courses as the other sex. We have to learn from all sides, rich and poor, strong and weak, Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, or other religions, different races, and of course, man and woman. And so, we all can eventually learn to overcome any negative biological tendencies in order to manifest our spiritual nature fully. Similarly, we all can learn to overcome any negative social or cultural teaching for the same reason. Some will lag behind because even though we are all traveling on the same path, we are not at all progressing at the same speed. It is the job of those ahead to reach back. with compassion and with love to help those behind. To reach back and help and expect neither rewards nor even thanks. To reach back and help because that is what spiritual beings do. I vividly remember being rescued by Marianne Williamson, a wonderful author and speaker, when we were presenting a workshop on healing relationships. The format was a dialogue. Marianne and I had agreed that I would talk for 10 minutes and then she would talk for 10 minutes, and then we would open the dialogue to the audience, answering and discussing their questions for the next 100 minutes. There were about 800 people in audience. Approximately 5 minutes into my opening comments, a woman near the front of the room stood up and raised her hand. Her behavior distracted me, and I asked what she wanted. Somewhat angrily, she said, "I came here for a dialogue, not a list." I had begun my 10-minute talk by going through a brief list of suggestions that I had used with my patients when I did couples therapy in my office. These techniques really help people, and I'm sharing my list with the group. Of course, this woman did not know I was only going to talk for 10 minutes. Perhaps she feared my list would expand to fill the entire 2 hours. I began to open my mouth to explain how Marian and I had agreed to structure the time, but I never got a chance to say a word. Marian, immediately protecting me, had jumped up, walked behind me, and with her hands firmly on my shoulder, glared at the woman standing alone in a room of 800 people. "Don't you know that men make lists?" Marian answered in a firm voice. The woman slumped back into her seat. "Why are you negating him? Why are you taking this away from him?" Then Marian launched into an eloquent and passionate speech about the differences between men and women. I appreciated Marian's defense. Perhaps men do make lists, I agreed, although some women do also. And women tend to rescue, as Marian demonstrated. I thought silently to myself. Love yourself. Do not worry about the opinions of others. If you really need to and want to decline some offer or obligation, say so. If you fail to do so, anger will creep in. You will resent the commitment and you will resent the person who obligated you. It is better to say no when you need to and to say yes when you want to. Physical illness often follows when one is not able to decline unwanted commitments, because this is a more acceptable way of saying no. Then you have no choice but to decline because your body says no for you. It is much healthier to assert yourself. There is a saying that I have seen on a t shirt that sums it up in a humorous way. Stress is when your mind says no, but your mouth opens up and says yes. Projection is the psychological action of denying your fears and conscious motivations and then giving these fears and motives to others. Be careful not to project your hidden feelings onto another or to ascribe motives and intent when there are none. This distortion of reality harms both of you and the other. For example, if you have fears of abandonment and low self esteem, and your date doesn't show up at the restaurant for the dinner reservation, you may tell yourself, "He really doesn't care about me. He's standing me up because someone better came along." In reality, your date may have been stuck in traffic. Understand the nature and influence of repeating patterns from childhood experiences or even from past lives. Without understanding, patterns tend to repeat, unnecessarily damaging the relationship. In my previous books, I have described how to recognize these repeating patterns and how to differentiate past life from present life origins. In chapter 2 of this book, the reaction of Andrea's mother to her newborn son's illness reflects a past life pattern, which was reaction to loss, repeating in the current life. Patterns of turning to alcohol or drugs in order to cope often have been repeating over many lifetimes. In relationships, as with alcohol and drugs, old patterns such as dominance, manipulation, or abuse may have once again resurfaced and be negatively affecting the participants. Sometimes regression to childhood or to past lives can show the real roots of an issue. Other times, the roots are shallow, arising from this life, and we are only letting our pride stand in the way of resolution. One of the most important of life's lessons is to learn independence, to understand freedom. This means independence from attachments, from results, from opinions, and from expectations. Breaking attachments lead to freedom. But breaking attachment does not mean abandoning a loving or meaningful relationship, a relationship that nourishes your soul. It means ending dependency on any person or thing. Love is never a dependency. Love is an absolute, unconditional, and timeless state that asks for nothing in return. Since it is important to love and honor yourself, you should not remain in a destructive relationship, even if you feel that you love the other person. The connection with that person might not work because of your partner's problems, lack of understanding, or exercise of free will. But it is important to remember that love is timeless. You will have many more chances to get it right. So we come to the end of the book reading and we'll resume back from chapter 4 again tomorrow, same time at 7 p.m. Till then, please take care of yourself and stay safe. This is Vibhana Sheen signing off. Good night.